Hi, I'm Sarah from the upcoming. So lovely to chat to you, Anne-Marie.
Hi.
Maybe you could kick off with just a really brief introduction to Growing Fangs. What can you tell us about the short film?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Growing Fangs is a story about a 15-year-old girl named Val who is half human and half vampire and struggling to fit into either world.
Obviously, in some aspects, it's about identity and kind of having this split identity, which I know as many people in the US as in the UK who have parents with different backgrounds, different heritages that they have to try and balance. But what made you decide to kind of tell it through this lens, this idea of her being half vampire?
Yeah, for sure. I originally thought of this story because it's something I experienced as well. I'm Mexican American and also bisexual, and so I always felt a struggle of being in between worlds and not exactly knowing where I fit in the world. And having to realize later in life that just because you're part of multiple identities doesn't mean you're any less of those identities. You're still fully that identity, and it makes you who you are fully. But for Val, I wanted her to be, Mexican and queer, and for those elements of her to be celebrated and normalized, and instead the conflict be this otherworldly element, which is her being a vampire. And the monster story in general, I've always loved monster stories because I think thematically they're essentially an outsider story of being misunderstood or feared, and any of us that have felt like an outsider can really relate to that story.
And what do you think it is? Because there's a lot of humor in the film, but it does touch on, important issues. So, why do you think humor can help us? And perhaps when you go into a really broad audience, like you might be through Disney, help us get into some of these issues, maybe, rather than tackling them on the nose, if you like.
Totally, totally. Well, I think, just in terms of, like, for example, with queer representation in film and TV, a lot of things I grew up with being queer were stories of tragedy. And those stories are really important because they're a truth in our community and they make us feel not alone. But at the same time, if we only hear those stories, I grew up thinking that when I came out one day, my life would be tragic. And so I think celebrating the beauty and joy of being different is also important so that kids and adults alike can see that that's a truth within our community as well. And in general, just laughter and humor, they're such a part of our day to day, even when we are struggling. It's what gets us through. And it's just such a part of life that I think when you are able to mix that, a real authentic story along with humor and whatever else, it really becomes emblematic to our day to day.
And was it important to you? Obviously, if it's based a bit on, coming from personal experience, it makes sense that you'd have like a female lead. But do you think it was also important to you to have that in your film? Perhaps in the past, we didn't see, the interior life of women, female characters as much, and perhaps not a conventional lead either. So, was that something that was important to you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think representation on all levels is so important, and seeing strong female characters is very, very important. And I think Kayla, the actress, just really made that so powerful. She was so incredible to work with and brought such an authentic and unique perspective to it. She's so charismatic, and right away you can just connect with her. And it's her story that, I also wanted to see and was inspired by working on set with her.
And what do you hope the impact of your film will be? Like I was saying, broad audience will be watching it. Do you
Yeah.
think there are some taboos there in, some of the issues we're tackling? In, what do you hope the impact would be? Perhaps prompting conversations within families and so on and so forth.
First and foremost, what I hope people take away from this is that, the very things that we're made to feel ashamed of or have to hide about ourselves, that those things are actually our superpower because they really make us see life in a very unique perspective that only we could see, and to really celebrate that and take ownership of that. And I hope it does start conversations of realizing how different our beautiful and different our differences can be. And I think, when you can tell a story that becomes very specific, it ends up actually becoming more universal. And even though this is specifically has a Mexican lead and a queer lead, I think those elements are relatable to all different types of people who have felt like an outsider or othered at some point in their lives.
And do you think that we have a more tolerant society these days, or do you still think there's some way to go, if you like?
Oh, I think there's always somewhere to go, but it's still so hopeful. And I think especially through this program, I gained a lot of hope and love through it. It was such a supportive program, and I got so close to the other filmmakers. We all became best friends, and all of us have had such a unique life experience in different countries and whatever else. And the fact that we all came together just on this small group and connected in such a way, it gave me hope for the world, and it gave me hope through this program to hopefully keep telling these stories that do connect us all.
Brilliant. Well, I'm out of time, but it was so lovely to chat to you. And thank you for this really wonderful film. Thanks, Anne Marie.
Thanks, Sarah.